Holly.
As that unfolds, can I ask that the whole board sort of be kept abreast of that unfolding rather than waiting until the March meeting to sort of
Sure.
report?
What's the unfolding part, the process part?
Yeah, just
Sure.
as you get more sure about what that's going to look like.
Sure.
That'd be great because people are going to be asking.
Yeah.
And it'd be great to sort of just give a, hey, this isn't it printer, it's not public yet, but kind of here's an update of where we're headed.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. But I have a lot of enthusiasm about this. I think that there's an opportunity here to not remake the system, but there's been some things, and I'm excited because you always try to get some stuff done for your chair. Isabel has really cared about this English language list issue for a long time. There's an opening here in terms of getting that right, and we've been hammering on that for as long as I've been on the board, been working for the board. So I'm hoping that we can advance that issue. So any questions about that before I start to talk about career readiness a little bit?
Yeah, can you just give us a quick rundown from your perspective, what you know today,
Sure.
of the things we've got to do regarding ESEA implementation?
Okay.
ESSA implementation.
Yeah, and there's and then there's the whole state. And there's some things in ESSA that we honestly don't have any authority to deal with. So I'm trying to separate out things we may be interested in versus things that directly affect our authority. I think the whole highly qualified teacher thing is immensely important. And I've already had board members emailing me about what does this mean, whatever. But we don't have any clear authority there. Obviously we have a broad desire to be informed and inform, but there's nothing in our statute about necessarily informing that particular aspect. So I don't know that I have the complete list, Connie, but certainly the best way to answer to that is to say that the state, Randy Dorn, as the state superintendent, the SEA, will be submitting a revised accountability workbook to the federal government on a date that I can't come up with right now. That workbook will have aspects of it that have either partial or full implications for us. Index any changes that we intend to make as a state in terms of how we identify that bottom 5% will need to be articulated in that revised workbook. So if there's changes in how language learners are addressed, that will need to be addressed. If there's changes in the incorporation of this so-called other indicators world, I don't like calling them non-academic because I actually think many of them are academic, but the non-test score measures that the law kind of invites into the process, that would need to be articulated in the workbook. At a staff level, there's already been kind of a preliminary discussion about taking a new look at how focus schools have been done. That historically we've used the index to identify schools with low performing subgroups. The numbers of those schools and how that happens, there's some thought that maybe there's some room there to make some changes. But all of those changes would need to be part of the submitted work group. And Jack, do you know what the date of the submitted workbook is? I'm sorry, I caught him off guard. But that's an initial list there, Connie.
Connie? Yeah, so we're simply reacting to what OSPI submits, or what is our role specifically in the accountability system at this point?
Sure. So you got two things going on here. You got state law and you got federal law, right? So as it relates to the new federal law, the law puts, appropriately, I mean, this is the way it should be, the law puts the superintendent of public instruction in charge of the submission of the accountability work group to the federal government. And that's the way it should be. I got no problems with that. But that's not the only thing going on. You've got state laws in terms of the development of state accountability systems that, needless to say, you want to be aligned with what you submit to the federal government. So our responsibilities emanate from the state law, not the federal law.
Okay,
Not
that
entirely.
helps.
There's some references to, you heard Brian accurately say today, for example, that business is included in the, state boards of education are also specifically called. But for the most part, the SEA is the guiding vessel, as it were, in the submission of whatever goes to the federal government. But you all have responsibilities for the accountability framework for the state, independent of whatever you submit to the federal government. Does that make sense? You got two different sets of laws.
I think this is something that we need, some of us that are veterans need a refresher on, and some of that are new need some good information from scratch. So I'd appreciate some work on this. Maybe a little, I've asked Jack, what is this? And can we get a little couple paragraphs on it or something so that we know what our work is in the next few months or 6 months or whatever.
Sure.
Thanks.
That's a great.
MJ and then Trace.
That's a great comment, Connie, and I appreciate that because that's one of the questions I probably had coming into this is and where we've seen the wax, what state mandated, what is our role and what is dictated as us as a board, because trying to figure out as a newbie what's OSPI, what's
Sure.
state board, and
Sure.
how do those coordinate, but that would be great, and especially I guess in in this context it makes sense to refresh that.
Well, there's places where the law is helpful and then places where the law is not super clear, But what we've always tried to do is just embody best practice, right? We're a policy board. We're not an agency that, so it really, OSPI is rightfully in the position of developing a lot of the details of this. That's what they do, right? And certainly implementing it. And then the state board is in the proper role of maintaining some level of oversight and having some basic values and principles that they want reflected in that. And so we try to, when the law is not helpful, we try to say, well, what from the outside looking in, what should be, what's the best practice here?
Trey.
I also think I really like, I've been on this board, I guess, 5 years now, which is hard to believe. And I really like the last 18 months or so, we've been doing more advocacy stuff, like responding to the governor's budget. And we've been doing things that we also have a role to do with advocacy, which is in our mandate. And everything we do is not just in WAC specific, but their advocacy is where I think we have underused it historically because it's such a broad interpretation of advocacy. And so in this opportunity where we're looking at I was going to say reinventing, but I'll use improving or another word, our accountability system. I would like to see us think through, we have a moment in time, and although OSPI might be responsible for the specifics, what else do we want as it connects to the accountability system to be saying back to the legislature, whether it be the social emotional index we saw, things like that. And then also taking a fresh look at our assessment system. And if we're looking at our accountability system, the accountability is coming from the assessment system, whether it be testing or whether it be social emotional career readiness or whatever. And I'd like to invite the executive committee, and I'll volunteer to be part of a committee if you guys need me to. But I really would like to see how we could use this, someone to do the advocacy piece and have 3 or 4 board members really explore what that looks like, whether it be the assessments, looking at the assessment system, making recommendations, looking at the career, looking at other pieces. Because I fear, and I'm not suggesting we're gonna do it, but I fear if we just focus so much on what the law says in terms of certain things, we're gonna miss the big advocacy piece here that we have and the big opportunity that we have as a board. So I know we got a lot going on, and it always seems like we never have enough time, but this moment is not going to come for a long time, I don't think. and it's hard. It's easier on the ground up than it is trying to change it once it's moving. So all things that aren't specific to OSPI, like advocacy and things, I would really like encourage us to find a space to, whether it's a letter, whatever it may be, but find a space to influence those factors.
just echo that. I think these opportunities are rare when we can step back and, you know, think about where have we come and be in a space where we have a little more authority now to and be innovative around this. And I think about this in relation to the conversations we had the first half of yesterday around the career readiness, and thinking about like how do we strengthen that piece and maybe think more innovatively of like how do we measure like the ultimate goal, right, for our students around career readiness. So I think I hear you, Ben.
Yeah, so
That's a
I've
good
been,
segue to career readiness, but go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I just wanted the board to know that I've been very proactive in terms of hammering out some process with OSPI and haven't had success yet. But when I do, that'll open the floodgates to say, okay, bang, 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 you know. And I really, frankly, I mean, if I have any regrets about some of the past work on accountability, we've done some great work, but I would do it differently in terms of there were times where we got so into the data minutia as a board. I think I've accumulated some wisdom over the 5 years. So the second time we, you know, what are our guiding principles? What are our values? What, you know, what do we want? And, you know, not be, you know, drilling into cell 6A34 and, you know, in the forum of, you know, I think that's probably not you know, a policy board flavor. So career readiness. So that was great. I mean, that conversation with workforce board was great, and went just about how Linda and I went over and met with.
Mona had something, sorry, I didn't see.
Just before you transition, and on the topic of the accountability work that we have to do, that our OSPI has to do and submit to the federal government, I did just a brief conversation with Gil Mendoza, and he says he has the lead in OSPI for framing the work that has to be done, setting up all these collaborative committees, et cetera. He says all of that's his responsibility. So I'm wondering, before we leave this, if we might ask you if you would have a sit down with Gil and really jointly develop a matrix. And this is advocacy, but it's also being a collaborative partner. Develop a matrix of what has to be done in our state to respond to all of the accountability factors that are in ESSER, and line that up with a side-by-side matrix, our connected matrix, which shows that state law requires that we do X, Y, Z in terms of accountability, so that we can get a document before our next meeting, which is not until March, and we can see how this is going to move down the highway. I think that would be very helpful. So you've already had a meeting with Gil?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But your idea is a good idea in terms of, that's certainly a legitimate thing for the board to want to know. So in terms of how the specific things line up. Like I said, we go into these things sometimes feeling like it's going to pour out in perfect clarity on a law, and it often doesn't. And there's some areas where the legislature has asked, for example, you know, and I think it's in the resolution, the law reads that, well, Parker, pull it up. I can't remember it by, you know, but one of the lifts straight from the law is that the legislature is assigned this. This is not writing on Ben's part. This is like cut and paste from the law, okay? The State Board of Education responsibility and oversight for creating an accountability framework that provides a unified system of support. I won't read it to you. That's directly from the law. Okay, so what does that exactly mean? Well, there's a couple places in the law where it gives more specific, you know, you got to identify, you got to create an achievement index. You have to establish performance improvement goals, you know. But in terms of where the lines start and end and things, you know, it's hard to, it's hard to necessarily draw a bright line. And that's why I'm less inclined to do it that way. And just to say, you know, let's treat this as a holistic piece. And as long as the board's input and authority is respected in that process, it's less of a concern to me that there's one particular sliver that, you know, is not, you know what I mean? In terms of, I think if we get too far into piecing it out, we will miss the whole and the coherence of it.
In what you're saying, and so just to make sure I understand, instead of trying to delineate out the specific duties of the board, what we are responsible separate from OSPI, and then doing that separately,
Right.
we should think about the accountability system as a whole piece.
That's right.
And how do we partner together, regardless if it's in OSPI's wheelhouse, our wheelhouse, we're working together to create a coherent system.
Isn't that what, as a citizen of Washington, you would expect, right? But I was responding to Mona's question about, I have gone through and pulled every single piece of statute that talks about what our responsibilities are in the accountability framework, and I've shared that. So, you know, we should be able, we're a bunch of pros, we should be able to figure this out. So. Career readiness. Okay. Well, the conversation that we had with the workforce board went just about, wouldn't you say, just about exactly how we drew it up there. We went over and met with the workforce staff about a month ago and mapped it out. And by gosh, sometimes it actually works exactly the way you. So that was great, and the fact that she was able to bring so many people, and they may have expressed this to you directly, but they expressed to us how gratified they were that they were reached out to and not asked to present, but actually kind of were, you know, part of the circle, as it were. They really liked that and wanted me to reiterate that. So there are a number of ways that this work could go, but I will start with some basic kernels from my standpoint in terms of why I even felt like this was fertile ground to pursue, okay? Because Linda and I have done some digging around in state statute and rules and kind of get a sense of the landscape. And we started with the basic fundamental premise here that, okay, all of our documents, all of our strategic plans, everything says career and college readiness, right? We have nationally done a pretty good job of defining the college aspect of it. And one might say nationally done a pretty decent job of defining career readiness in the sense that there's no shortage of definitions out there. But when you look at and again, so far as I know as of today, you know, we've really done some digging, but when you look at how Washington State deals with career-ready standards, like 21st century learning standards, for example, it is in the context of CTE. And that's a problem, because if career and college readiness is our vision for all students, and the standards that we employ for career readiness are in a program that some students may participate in for one class or what, you know, the fundamental point, and I think that Eleni, this was the first thing out of her mouth, was career readiness is not CTE. It is part, I mean, they are related, certainly, but, you know, the kiddo that takes one occupational ed class but goes on to advanced physics has every bit the need for habits of mind and skills that are preparing one for a career that the welder does. And so, you know, credit to Linda, but, you know, as we started peeling the onion on this thing, and again, I'm kind of waiting for somebody to pop out of the woodwork and say, well, you forgot to look at this thing. But at this point, I don't know that Washington State has ever said that, yes, career readiness is important for all kids, and here is what that is for all kids, not just the standards of a CTE class. So we have, I don't know that it's ever been an official action, but I think the CTE world has adopted 21st century learning skills as part of their framework, and that's not a new thing. But yesterday, you heard the articulate presentation by the Gibson Eck folks, and Connie, you made the comment. I had the same note in there's a whole page of their application about the habits of mind, and I think they call it personal qualities of all of their graduates. I don't remember the page number, but, and they expect that of all kids. Has Washington State said anywhere what those expectations, whether they're assessed or not, I think is a separate question. But, whether there's paid curriculum, whether we create some giant fiscal note is not even, I say no. I'm just saying at the basic fundamental level, have we articulated as a state what those career-ready traits, skills, standards are for all kids? And it's not clear to me at this point that we have. And then, so that's kind of a big picture thing. And then there's a series of little picture things. In the process of digging into this, Linda found the old work-based learning rule. There's a rule on work-based learning that oddly I think probably should be on our rules, but is not, but at any rate hasn't been amended for a while. Still has a time-based component where all of our other credits that we award do not. And we've, there's been some feedback that some of the time-based components of that work-based rule create some odd disincentives. So a kid might not engage in work-based learning if they don't know they're going to get the number of hours that they need from their employer to satisfy the thing to earn the credit. But, taking a look at that is possibly one part of this journey. There's a number of other things that we've listed that I'm not coming up with. The Workforce Board got wind of the WSIPSI tool, the High School and Beyond tool that now Seattle, by the way, is taking a very significant. And they have their Career Bridge website that they have invested in. So in the interest of, how can these things be braided and to make sure that, their work in this space is valued. I'm not really steering that whole process. That's something I instigated and got going, but really OSPI and WSIPSI are implementers in that. But we can help kind of try to bring these things together from an electronic tool perspective. There's the potential for some statute here, but we're not there. I don't really have any specific. It seems to me that if we do get to the point of saying that we do want to articulate those career-ready standards for all students, where's the right place to do that? Is that something that should appear in law? Is it something that should appear, that's a question that's way down the road. What am I missing here, Linda? Do you want to come up and just hang out with me? So we have started to really, we have a couple of paths in mind here, but the conversation went in some directions we didn't anticipate, which is good. That's the way it's supposed to be.
It's the deep learning.
Oh, right. Thank you. Like the most obvious thing. So when we started looking around for materials for this meeting and we invited NASB to join us, they said, and there is an opportunity to apply for what they call a deeper learning grant or stipend. It's not a lot of money. It's really not so much for the money. I mean, I think they're handing out, $15,000 to $20,000 a state or something. But it's enough to get some convenings going, to have some conversations about some of the things that we're talking about in a broader context, and maybe get an expert in here to fly in somebody to, not just for a board meeting, to sit and have a work session and that sort of thing. And one of the things that we talked with Eleni and her staff about is, might they want to kind of go in on that? It's not a huge commitment. It's not a lot of money, but it would be a step. It would be a formal step that we could take. And it seemed like they had some interest in doing that, and particularly given how the conversation went. You know, Eleni has very grand, and I applaud that, very grand ambitions for this, and you know, my mind always goes to the kind of the practical, what things could we get done sort of thing, and I think there's more exploration needed, but those are some of the things on my mind.
Holly, and then Peter.
So I think the first thing that I want to say is that I'm super excited about this work. I think, you know, my entire career has spanned this same conversation in various iterations over and over, and not just in my role as a CTE teacher, but also looking at how to expand that. So it's super, super exciting. That having been said, and not to be downer, but when we start talking about the career readiness part and having some kind of standard definition and potentially some way to assess it, some other words come into my head. And those words are TPEP, 24 credits, Common Core and Next Generation Science Standards, and the need to meet high-stake assessment requirements for all kids. You guys, the plate is so full. It is falling off the plate. There is not one tiny little gold rim edge showing. And so my question is, and I mean, I have personal feelings about where I would value this career readiness piece, this soft skill piece in the frame of these, right? But as a board, we can't just add something to this plate. There's no room left. So the question is, what prior thinking or what are we gonna have to give up? And how? How do we buy wiggle room for this?
Well, there's a couple of, first of all, to the extent that I'll be transparent about my own thinking. My head is not even in the direction of an assessment. Like, that's not even entered my mental landscape on this. So for whatever that's worth, doesn't mean it hasn't entered yours, but hasn't entered mine. I'm not sure that it is. Well, I'll give you another example. We're talking about 24 credits, and we're talking about ways that we can meaningfully deal with the struggle to get to 24 credits and career pathways, right? You heard Bunker talking about how we used to have a culminating project as a requirement. We don't anymore, right? Some districts still do the culminating project. And if the board came out, for example, and said, we support the culminating project as a crediting instrument, that we think that as part of the journey to get to 24 credits, we would have no problem and indeed would develop guidance for districts to award a credit for culminating project, then there's a couple of birds being killed with one stone there. You are advancing the ball on career readiness. You are advancing the ball on, you know, Linda's tireless work to, you know, run around the state for 7 or 8 symposiums and, you know, try to provide strategies and support. Seems consistent. Doesn't mean they have to, doesn't mean they even want to. But have they thought about it? I know a lot of districts, we say it and they go, oh, you know, they got rid of it because it's one of the few opportunities they had to get rid of a state requirement. But how could this be a local thing that they do that helps them get to 24 credits is an interesting concept. That's one example. But Holly, I mean, my whole life is being, you know, going around and talking to folks that say exactly what you say, you know, I mean, so I get it. But this is important work. And it's important because as a state, we keep saying the same thing, that we want career and college readiness for all students, and we have not articulated what that means in the career space for all kids on any level so far as I can tell. We have articulated a set of CTE program standards, which to me is a very different thing and has led to an image problem that career readiness is for those other kids. It's the thing you do at Core Plus or the Skills Center or the vocational program. And what an exciting sort of transformative paradigm shift it is for the board to say, hey, let's, regardless of what subsequent requirements may materialize, let's talk about this as the behaviors and habits of mind for all kids, and that the board values that. And we'll use that as a lens for everything that it does. That's important. That is important.
Well, and it excites me that the board might have a role in helping to gather those resources, do that background, and be able to provide that body of knowledge and sort of best practice and best thinking around that.
A couple states have done that.
Super exciting.
Yeah, a couple states have needless to say, we're not the first to the party on this one. You know, guess who? Massachusetts. States have said, you know, hey, we have, you know, and they're pretty broadly, you know, broadly construed, and they're not necessarily, you know, extremely detailed rubrics where state officials are running around with each kid, you know, but just to say, hey, that, you know, this is our understanding as a state about, you know, so Iowa has, it was Iowa? Iowa has adopted a series of, I don't even think they call it career ready standards, but they have another term for it, by grade band, you know. So I don't have all the answers here, but I know enough to know that despite the fact that, as Randy said, we've been working on this a long time, I'm not sure that we hit the one thing we should hit, which is that this is about all kids, not CTE kids.
Peter?
So this is kind of parallel to Holly's comment. If we go down this path, I think we need to be very deliberate about having a communication strategy to go with it, because my perception is that the folks in the field are in a different space. The whole idea that even career is parallel with college is not universally understood or accepted, and then the idea, we get a lot of information about what career means and the possibilities of these really powerful and rewarding rich jobs, but that's not necessarily known. So there is a cost in the sense of, I think it would be a mistake for us to go down this road without at the same time building in a way to really, and then it requires a lot of repetitions because it takes time and for this to sink in, for the communications about, so career means X and this is Y, and examples and so forth. Because we're just, I don't know if other board members have the same perception, but in talking with schools and districts, a lot of them are saying, well, college and career, what does that really mean? Does that, you know, are they the same requirements? And they're all thinking about their own experience, which may or may not be the contemporary experience as well.
Yeah.
So
and my
yeah. So I just think if we do this, not as an afterthought, sort of when we get to the point of announcing, and then we have a well constructed video or something, but all along the way. So.
MJ?
So a couple of thoughts. I definitely want to reiterate, Ben, your comments about, you know, needing to hit all kids and intentionally, because I've been hearing the 21st century skills. Yes, they're being taught in our schools. Yes, they're being taught in our schools. And so then when I asked, okay, then how? Oh, in our CTE classes, it's you know, it's all laid out. But then, okay, then how? You know, it's there. I see the verbiage on some curricular or some, you know, strategy somewhere, but is it really playing out? And again, I'll say that from the employers I'm hearing from, they're saying no. So I definitely think this is worthy work. And, you know, the how is the question. And Peter's comment and Holly's comment, when we were hearing from the panel earlier today, I think somebody talked about the health kind of our system, the impact of, and Holly made the comment of whiplash, you know, with ESSA, and new things. And I started to think, is there a way for us to measure our system health? Like, I know we have indicators for some things, but like our system, our teachers' morale, and, our administrators' morale, because we have gone through a series of changes, and the impact of those changes have been great on their plates, and on our teachers, on our school administrators, on our districts, on our kids. And there is a cost. There is a cost to all that. So, I wish we had some measurement of how that's doing, because without that, we can keep forging ahead, and we could be losing, we might be winning the battle, but we're losing the war. So I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't even know what that would be. But it makes me think, and especially in light of this conversation about, something that is as worthy as this, but it is another shift. And even if it's just a statement, it's another way of thinking about things, and then how, the impact of that, and then the implementation of that for districts, for administrators, for principals, teachers. It is an addition to their plate. And, how can we navigate that with the least amount of negative impact, to our system? And again, our teachers are somebody said, our teachers and our students. And if morale's down and all that, I'm not sure we're doing, we've got to be intentional and thoughtful about all that.
So I have Judy and then Connie, and then I just want to queue up if either one of our student representatives want to talk a little bit about either one. I would love your thoughts too.
Well, I just had, as I'm sitting here listening, I'm thinking, what are we trying to do? It seems like we're trying to pour new wine into old wineskins. Sorry for the biblical reference. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But we're trying to pour new stuff into an old paradigm. And I think we need to have some strategic shift in our thinking, on our conversation about, because I love the idea that what you're saying is everybody's career ready. It's not a parallel thing. Career and college are not parallel things. College is part of being career ready. CTE is being part of career ready. Soft skills are being part of career ready. And how we speak about them and how we engage what we already have in place it's not adding to the plate. It's kind of, arranging what you've got on your plate with, half vegetables and a quarter meat, and all that kind of stuff. You're just putting it where it's supposed to be. So so just as I'm sitting here thinking, I think we've got to shift our paradigm about how all this is supposed to work, because we've got, and this is a big transitional time, and it's really messy, but it's really important that we get out of the old 19th, 20th century school model mentality. I rest my case.
Connie.
I think if you take a look at the learning standards of number 4, that's where this lies.
Yep.
This is a requirement that's been on the books since 1993.
Yep.
I think that if you take a look at probably TPEP, some of the teachers are being already evaluated on instilling some of these practices and already with kids. They're already being observed in classrooms, right? They keep track of this stuff, a good share of it, some of it. And the other thing is, if you take a look at an elementary report card, they've got a lot of that citizenship stuff in there. They've got their kids are already being evaluated on some of these career-ready standards. I think there's a lack of intentionality, though. Yeah. I think if you take a look at some of the intervention models that are out there, where teachers are beginning to be aware that the importance of some of these skills, instilling some of these skills. We talk about grit. Grit is not going to be a separate class. Grit is going to be something that's intentional, that teachers said, okay, this is really important, and so we're going to maybe shift the way I do my business so that we can really practice this and really ensure that the kids are persistent. Persistence is not going to be a separate class. It's going to be part of what we do. So I think the culminating project is a really excellent way of bringing this all together and providing one last shot at kids before they go out the door to, for some of those practical skills. But I think that these career readiness standards are going to be integrated throughout every class by every teacher if we do it right. Thank you.
And Connie, remember that the culminating project was the actual practical manifestation of Learning Goal 4, or it used to be. And now the only remnant is basically CTE, right? That feels like the overall message that we've sent now, is that the requirement that was associated with Learning Goal 4 is no longer. Our actual articulation of expectations about career and readiness basically manifest in the one credit that you would take in CTE, and that's kind of a tough place to be. You know, when your letterhead says, you know, every kid career and college ready. Learning goal number 4 is kind of in limbo a little bit.
Sorry, back to our Madeline. Do either one of you have anything you want to share? Madeline.
I have a couple things. First, as we've been having this discussion, I've been trying to define career readiness for myself, and I'm definitely not at a definition I'm satisfied with, but it seems to be just the generic soft skills that everyone would need to be able to go and get a job or a career. It seems like being really specific to careers that people are interested in and teaching them the specifics for that career is really unrealistic. That's what going into trade school or college would be for, in my opinion. However, I think it's really important that students are researching jobs and seeing what they're interested in, and maybe being exposed to careers that they could be interested in through internships or what was that called? Career Bridge, is that what it was? I actually looked at that, and I started taking the quizzes, and I checked almost every box. Are you this type of person? Are you this type of person? Because I want to keep my options open, even if I'm not quite that person. I haven't completely finished the process because it's a really long quiz, but I want to finish that and see what happens. I liked what Connie said about teachers being intentional. There are times when I've experienced teachers being intentional about getting you ready for a future job, and there are times when I feel like the work I am doing is pointless, and it's a real feeling, and I definitely feel it now. I remember a couple weeks ago we were supposed to do these presentations for Poetry Out Loud. We had to recite poetry, and a kid in my class asked why, and I was actually impressed by the response by my teacher. And she said, well, you know, one of these days you're going to have a job where you're probably going to have to present something, so you may as well practice. And I think that's really important to make kids aware, because all of a sudden everyone kind of straightened up. Oh, if this is practice for something that's going to be valuable to me in the future, then okay, I'll try, and I'll try harder. Another thing, I really like the idea of the culminating project being an extra credit, because I do not have to do one. But I know that my community really, really loved it, and they're disappointed. I've heard from many, many people that they're disappointed that they can't come in and watch the senior presentations anymore because they don't exist. So that would not only help alleviate some of the stress on the students and staff, but it also pleased my community at least. I was thinking about the presentation yesterday where we discussed all of the jobs that surround, like, let's say an engineer. It's not just the engineer that's important, it's all of the staff that work with that engineer and the technicians and things, and it made me think of just the human body. We can't all be the eyes or the ears. We have to have some hands and fingers and toenails and feet. So making sure that kids realize that we need everyone, and everyone can be different. Doctors, dentists, engineers are kind of like the three big careers that everyone always hears about, but we don't hear about any of the other side ones quite as often. And I think that's sad. I think that it'd be great to educate our young people on what else is out there. And then I have a concern, which was mostly alleviated by what Ben said, about how we would measure career readiness. Because I was like, oh no, not another test. So as long as we're not going towards assessments, that gives me hope. And then my other question going along with measuring career readiness is, would that tie into a student's graduation requirements? It's just an open question. Or would it just be to kind of look at system health? But soft skills, I don't know, just a question to throw out there.
Baxter?
It's funny because Madeline and I kind of have this ongoing joke that I love going right after her or even around her talking, because I sit there and I listen to her and I go, thanks, you really set me up. But no, I'm in total agreement with the application of subjects. I think that's something that is really missing, but it's so easily done. It's really easily executed, and all it takes is a little bit of education and just telling them, like, this is the application of it. And I also do not have to do a culminating project. And in relation to the community piece, which this is actually something that's been going on in my community, a lot of the nonprofits near Gig Harbor are actually dealing with a shortage of volunteers now due to the no culminating project, which was a backlash that nobody was expecting. Because, I mean, I guess I didn't realize it, but if you combine the two high schools in my district, that's around 800 students that were going out into the community and engaging with organizations or helping out with whatever it was. And I just thought that was a really interesting accident. I don't want to call it a phenomenon because it really wasn't a good thing. It was not. And then the one thing, because Madeline pretty much covered everything I wanted to say except one thing, and I was like crossing my fingers hoping you weren't going to say it. Last night we were working on my presentation, and yesterday somebody had mentioned career, college, and civic ready. And I think it's important to realize that everything kind of falls under civic, because civic covers all of that. Civic is just post-secondary. It's life in the real world, and I think that's something we need to keep in mind, is that yes, ultimately we want them to have successful careers, and yes, we want some to go on to college, but we need to keep in mind we just need to prepare them for life and not necessarily just the soft skills for a career. It needs to be to just be a good citizen and how to function properly in society, not just to you can get this job well and do it well.
Thank you. Very thoughtful. Thank you so much. We have Bob and Holly.
My comments pale, I think, to what the two students just said. I got to rethink on
Your strategy.
I got to ratchet up here a little bit. I just want to say that what Holly said, and I'm glad she gets to speak next, got my attention because I too am excited about this last couple meetings. Goes back to January. And the attitude of the board and how it's beginning to see. And I have to tell you, my whole adult life has been spent automating people's jobs. And me and people like me have been very successful at doing that. Yeah, and we all knew that we were going to put people out of work. And we assumed that the school system was going to change, just like it did when agriculture began to go away and people moved into factories, and we had to teach people how to read and write just so they could run the machines. Now we are faced with people who have machines that think for them, and you've got to be a whole level higher in order to compete for those jobs, and the school system, to me, has not kept up. And there are parents now that are beginning to see this for their kids, and they're demanding what you just said, Judy. You know, we want a new model, and it's beginning to pop up. We saw a request for no credit waiver, and they don't really need no credit. They've got plenty of opportunities to grant credits right now themselves and not even ask us, okay, not even come here. And last week I was working with Chelan, who has a big picture school. They don't want to even tell anybody. It's just going. And there are kids there having a terrific time. Methel Valley has one. Nobody knows about it, you know. Jeff Petty, who I've met, who is here, is running around the state starting these things. He's got the producer of the movie Most Likely to Succeed spending the whole week in Seattle next week at showings. And this little movement of changing the mold is going to open up a new plate. That's all it's going to dump the current plate off, okay? Because the whole TPEP model starts to change, the measurements change. And I think, you know, this is kind of a slow underground revolution that to me is exactly what's needed. And a whole new set of measures, which if you watch Issaquah, for instance, in their school, here you got some of the brightest parents, brightest kids, no limit on resources. They're all going to be successful whether they go to a big picture school or not. You know, it doesn't matter what school, they're going to be successful. Watching those schools and how they formulate the 21st century skills and how they pull them together, I think would be a very valuable thing for this board to do, to stay close to some of these experiments that are going on. But I wouldn't push it because there's so much invention. And I think Baxter and Madeline's comments hit me in that when someone asked Baxter, where did you get your leadership kind of skills? He said it was in leadership class, you know, leadership discussion groups. And Madeline said it was by modeling teachers. You know, teachers model the behaviors and so on. I would tell you in the workforce, you learn it in situations. You learn it in real world situations. And that's what that Most Likely to Succeed movie displayed, was kids being forced to work together to solve a problem and to get along with people that they may not like or didn't know, or meet people, you know, and figure out what their skills are, and then manage those relationships to accomplish a piece of work, okay? Hopefully, you know, the culminating project was supposed to do that. But I would tell you that the teachers didn't know how to make it work because they haven't been in that. They're in silos, okay? So I think this getting all kids into some forms of projects, into something they're interested in. I know the ones in Chelan have picked, there's 30 kids, they're all Hispanic, low income. They picked designing and building and marketing a new skateboard, okay? And it's incredible what they're doing. Teacher would have never picked that, okay? And teacher didn't know what to do, okay? But they're having Skype sessions around the country with people who build skateboards. They're into the math of a skateboard. They're into the art of a skateboard. They're into marketing. They're into working as a team to figure out how to do that. Some want long boards, some want short boards. I didn't know there was all this in it. And that's the new emerging school to me.
Holly and then Baxter.
I have to think of where I was at here. There's so many good things on the table. So a couple of things I've been thinking about. One is I think, again, just confirming for myself that this meeting actually has been one of the most exciting meetings for me since I've been on the board. We've spent time really in a really meaty way with really quality materials and presenters, really talking about the things that are the conversations of my heart, you know, that bring me to this table, opportunity to learn gaps and the importance of social emotional learning, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, that's one piece of this sort of intellectual, emotional involvement that I have with it. And then the other piece of it, though, is the reality on the ground. And I think about just the arc of my career. And when I first started teaching, I was a constructivist. Those of you who know a little bit about educational theory, you know, students have a lot of self-efficacy. It's hands-on. You learn through experience. You start with that experience, and then you go to the more theoretical. And I spent probably the first 5 years of my career creating a lot very similar to what the Big Picture School today, something Eck school. What's the Gibson Eck? Thank you. But they were talking about how do you track, how do you do these project-based learnings where kids are working in teams, but actually track the learning. And then standards came down the line, the first state standards, and the WASL. And I didn't understand that from that broad sort of project-based, social, emotional, real-world, hands-on learning to this idea of that sort of upside-down design, that you have actually a target and you're designing your instruction to meet that target. And it swung my pendulum a little bit because now I had to identify what exactly I wanted my students to learn out of this. And it was very complicated in that project-based environment to target those targets within that project and to manage it. The management piece of that standards-based grading piece of that was really complicated, but it was worth it. Super, super time intensive. And this was before we linked test to graduation. And it was constantly sort of a calculus that I was performing about that balance between, okay, what standards am I giving up content-wise? What content am I not going to cover that I knew I was supposed to be covering in order to overtly teach, track, assess, target the soft skills that I wanted my students to learn. And every day I was running that calculus. What am I giving up and what am I gaining, and balancing that? And then the biology end of course exam became a graduation requirement for my students, or I was facing that reality. And I no longer had a choice to daily make those decisions for my kids. I must cover that content within a year. Because if I make my decisions for my kids in my classroom and I'm giving up my content time to incorporate that real world learning, those soft skills, I cover about 2/3 of my content. And it doesn't matter how perfectly my kids learn that, along with all of this other unmeasured content. If I am leaving out 1/3 of my content, there's no way they can pass that test, and there's no way they can graduate. So I teach content. And I have years of, developing my pedagogy because of my CTE background, because of team teaching for 20 years with a special education teacher. I definitely have done what you said. I'm working much, much smarter than I've ever worked. And definitely my pedagogy incorporates those things. But for my most struggling students, those soft skills have to be overtly taught. You can model it, right? And you can expose them as much as you can as you're flying through your content to real world situations. And for my English language learners, and for my really mobile students who are in their 17th school in the last 5 years, I have to pause everything and I have to teach the vocabulary and I have to say to them, hey, step out and look at your learning. You are learning this thing. We're practicing it because it's important because of this, and that takes time. And so the kids that are the most impacted by that, the kids that most need to be learning those soft skills and having me hold their hand and overtly teach them, are getting the least of it. That's my reality. Does that make sense? So, I'm balancing this vision and this sort of theory that we're talking about that, from the very beginning, it's why I do what I do. And then I think about my daily reality, and I don't know if any of you, I saw everybody kind of sigh, when Sally handed out the package tied in the pretty bow yesterday. But as I read through some of these, I see this reality reflected for other people. Extremely heavy and challenging pacing tied to Common Core doesn't give an inch for the time devoted to testing instead of the learning I used to do with my students. And, that's my daily reality. So I just want to keep putting that in front of you as part of this conversation as we balance this. And then the second piece of this is more practical. Ben, I really appreciated you thinking about the high school and beyond plan or a culminating project as a way to incorporate these things. And just quickly describing what we do in my district, because I think it's exactly what you're talking about, and I think it's so excellent. It's been a decade in the making. But our students actually have an advisory period that's modeled after NAV 101. We call it Pride 101. Students are required to take it. They stay with an advisor through all 4 years of high school, and it is actually our career unit. And we have a developed curriculum that is an assured service that every student gets, and it's from career explorations. We use a tool, kind of some ASVAB type explorations, actually exploring careers, some financial literacy. Students are credited for it, 0.25 credit per year. And then their senior year, this was back when a culminating project was required by the state, And we still require a culminating project for graduation, but what we've done is we've made the culminating project be the student themselves. The culminating project is their high school and beyond plan, and they have to present it to a panel of people. And the final piece that we've just dialed in this last year that has changed the whole thing to make it real is that before students are allowed to present, and they have to pass, they have to meet a benchmark in scoring in front of a panel in order to graduate. I mean, that one thing holds up their graduation, and they can do it over and over till they get it right. But we help them and support them, and I don't think any kid has never not passed their final presentation. But before they're allowed to present, whatever their pathway, the second half of the senior year, kids divide themselves into four-year school, tech school, workforce, and military. And they are doing things related specifically to their pathway, and they have to show evidence. If they say their pathway is going to a four-year college, they have to submit evidence that they filled out the FAFSA. If they say that and their college application, right? They have to show us what they're doing. And that's a huge thing that and then they get credit for it as well. So, and it's, you're developing those soft skills, that awareness that you were talking about different careers. So I'm excited about exploring that maybe as a venue to kind of put some of this thinking that we're doing.
Thank you, Holly. We have Baxter, and then I think we are, Ben, I think we're bleeding into our business items time. So how are you? Okay. So Baxter.
If you guys, I don't have to speak.
No.
You really covered
No.
what I was-
Go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah.
During my presentation, there was that line about a lot of the skills that the person had learned for career readiness was through the journey of high school, not high school itself. And I think that's something that needs to be kept in mind. I know I keep saying that, but because I personally watched that, because I've been in leadership for multiple years, and I have this friend, and I was convincing her, I was like, you should really try leadership, and she tried it, and she got put in charge of our homecoming committee, and she was very, well, it was very purposeful, and she was a little bit more quiet, and we were co-chairs for the homecoming committee, and she's one of my very close friends. And we went through the entire process, and the teacher just kind of steps back because it's our homecoming. It's up to us. We plan it and everything, and she came up to me after homecoming, like it was like a week later. She came up to me and she started crying. And she goes, I haven't grown this much as a person ever. She goes, I really had to push myself to get this accomplished. She goes, I don't usually boss people around. I don't usually have to look at people and make these type of decisions. I don't have to deal with time management. That she was like, this was a very eye-opening experience for me. She goes, I feel like better. She goes, I just feel like I can accomplish more. And so I think we need to keep the experience a huge part of it, because it's one thing to give a lesson, but an experience can't be replaced.
I completely agree with that. I will just share one very quick story. But I used to be a Girl Scout leader in the south side of Milwaukee with, it was a group of Hispanic girls. And, many interesting stories. I have many, one being that we would go camping, but I would bring a TV and a VCR, and we'd watch movies up in the woods. But one thing that I thought was because they were from the city, like, we were not going outside, like, outside of the cabin, or at least the first time we'd go up there. But anyways, one of the things that I think had the greatest impact on those students, and I was a co-lead, and I would say my co-leader was just amazing because she'd been doing a lot of youth development work for many years, is that she had those girls plan everything, every single aspect of that trip, from the budget to buying the food to what we would be doing, and they learned really quickly that to have potato dinner night where everything had to do with potatoes may not be the best thing. So we had scalloped potatoes, French fries, and mashed potatoes. And they were like, this is great. We get to have what we want. And they're like, oh, maybe not so great, right? But they learned how to budget. They learned how to plan their time. We ended up, because they got so good at this planning part of it, plan, do, and review, we would talk about how did it go? How did it go for you? That they planned their own graduation. I mean, their transition into high school. And they presented the budget in front of the parents. They said, here's how much the need is in terms of what the school can put forward, but we have some other things we want as part of graduation that the school can't cover. Can we do some fundraisers? They did the fundraisers. I mean, they learned how to plan, and that was something that wasn't happening in the classroom because there wasn't time. And so one thing like we haven't talked here a lot about is what's the relationship between our other, there's what happens in the school day, but there's also, that all happened because I was the after school and summer school programmer, right? And I was like, if they're not getting that during the day, then, I'll work with the teachers to figure out how do we do that before and after school, because during the day, our school was 99% for reduced price lunch. Many of our students were English language learners. They legitimately had to focus on instruction during the day. And I could see in being an IA sort of in the classroom, they were trying to do some project-based work, but it was that after school, out of school time where we practice some of those other skills too. So just thinking about, we have partners in this work, that it just doesn't all have to land on the teacher's plate or during the school day. We have to think about how do we leverage our other partners, and and I think that's the value in defining. Let's define what we mean by soft skills, career readiness, what civic, being civic minded, and how do we bring other partners into this conversation to make that happen if it's not happening during the school day for whatever reason. Yes, go ahead, Trey.
The one word is competencies, as I keep thinking about, but I also just keep pointing back. This is all great, but if as a state we're going to just measure students, whether they graduate or not, on such a very limited framework, it's never, to me, it's never going to be fully realized. And so I think it just begs for us again to continue looking at our assessment system, because you can do all this stuff, but if you, at the end of the day, if you're only telling people we're going to hold you accountable for this test, that's what people are going to do, is focus on that.
All right, are we ready for business items?
Yeah, the last thing you wanted me to run over was a few minutes on the opportunity gap discussion that we had.
Yes.
So about 3 weeks before the meeting, we had a meeting with Tim, who you heard from, myself and Andrew, and then a gentleman that works with the Washington State Association of Nonprofits. And we were, both of those two, Tim and Rick, were kind of engaged in similar but not identical projects. We were kind of a third party thinking about something but not yet engaged in something. And so the way that would proceed is we're going to try to get that group back together and say, with the board's willingness to bring some time and resource to the table here, is there a collaborative project here that we could work on? It may be, and I already have this sense that there's certain things that both Rick and Tim want to get done that, I mean, these might not be exactly the same things, but there might be kind of a concentric circle center here in terms of being able to produce something that communities can use, not in the achievement index accountability world, but in terms of learning about their kids in their community. And not, one of the things that's interesting is after all the sophistication we've built up as a state technologically and by data, there's still a tremendous amount of kind of one-off analyses. Like a community wants to have a discussion about something, well, let's have somebody go dig up the data that, there should be a thing that is, if nothing else, kind of a conversation starter and a storyteller about your community in terms of these inputs and equity measures that impact the lives of kids. And that seems, I have a fairly clear vision that could be done and is not an insurmountable project, but getting the right partners together, the resources and whatever. So I will continue that dialogue, and it may or may not produce a partnership, but I will extend the resources and efforts of the board to try to make that happen.
Holly?
I just want to say that I would strongly support if the board needs to put some resources or time or staff time into that endeavor. Again, that was just like one of the most exciting things I've seen. I really, and I think that we would be one of the prime benefactors of that work. And it also gives us a chance to educate ourselves, right? And to bring multiple people to the table that are trying to query the data, maybe in slightly different ways, as that work goes forward, to think about how to display the data or what to underlie that we could access. So I think that would be really a great use of our time or resources.
Peter?
Yeah, so I'm going to be a wet blanket. Great discussion about career readiness. We had a long discussion about a lot of work to be done in ESA. Now we're talking about this, and I'm feeling uncomfortable about whether we're loading up more than we can do, and I don't know what mechanism we have to restrain ourselves. We have a strategic plan. So I throw it out there. We do have this process which we started for new projects, and we're eager. That doesn't mean that each of these things is worthy, but we are talking about limited time and limited resources, and we have residual work, 24 credits, for example, where we've made a major initiative and we are still working on it phase. So that's my wet blanket, and I don't have a proposal exactly how we go forward, but I think we should be very mindful about what we can accomplish well.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. And I think about that a lot. Now, just to be clear, some of these are in fulfillment of existing strategic plan initiatives, not the creation of new ones. And I went over that at the beginning of the meeting, and I can pull that out again, but there's specific objectives where this could be the manifestation of the fulfillment of a commitment that we have made. That's the first thing. Second thing is there's a difference between how much bandwidth you guys have for issues and how much bandwidth we have and what we ask the staff to do versus what is mental work for the board. And each project's a little different in that way. I would imagine, for example, that this, if we do kind of forge some sort of partnership with Tim and Tim and Rick, we're not going to ask you all to, you would not be in the development role of that. That would probably be mostly in the background, would not be policy work that the board did. You would be apprised of it. We would try to seek your input in terms of its look and feel and all that. But that would not be like a huge agenda gobber, you know, like we wouldn't have big chunks of time at a meeting dedicated to that in my conception of this. Not true for career readiness, though. That is more of something you all have to tackle, and that is going to be something that you know, would be something that would take up chunks of time on the agenda. So that is a, you know, that is a consideration, as ESSA would as well. There are some things conceivably, and I do the best I can to do these things, believe it or not, 4 to 6 meetings out to the extent that that's possible. But we went through about an 18-month period where we spent a lot of hours on RAD, required action. I anticipate spending less time, and the reason we spent some time this meeting is because we had to meet a statutory requirement. But some of the time we spent on RAD may, in fact, be supplanted by ESSA discussions. And some of the discussion we had on 24 credit may be supplanted by some of the career readiness discussions, to the extent that that is a there's certain ways in which those are actually the same thing, as we just discovered. Now, on a staff side, I am a little concerned. Linda and I have purchased for ourselves 2 months of a traveling blitz. So she and I will be on the road at these various 24 credit symposiums for the next 8 to 10 weeks. And so our ability to keep that going with legislative session and some of those things on, you know, is going to be a challenge. So, but it can be managed too. It can be managed. So every year I have this where when legislative session comes, we might spend 10 minutes on it in a board meeting. It's maybe 60% of my brain, you know. So I think it's a good cautionary note, and I think we just need to manage it at the executive committee level as we go forward. But I wouldn't discourage you for taking on this career readiness discussion because I think it could be fruitful on a number of different fronts and without creating, I know there's this sensitivity to giving districts another thing to deal with. I'm not sure that's what this is going to be. It might, in fact, be providing a mechanism to deal with things differently that might be welcomed. Who knows? But yeah, I'm not planning like we would have a soft skills test next month, for example.
I think point well taken, because I've started to feel a little anxious about staff time when I think about, especially, it's unclear, right now, how much time ESSA is going to take.
Right. Some of this is
or not.
exploratory.
Yeah, exactly. Versus
My point is not that we should not do these things, but we should be very intentional about it and realize in our enthusiasm that there is a staff cost, there is a cost among us, and it's probably more than we anticipate also.
Yeah. And while we also, and that's really super appreciated, Peter. And the other thing is that I would say, like I say, I have a few, like we talked about, I have a few things in mind in terms of where these things to go, but there's still, it's this exploratory in nature. And these things don't come in predetermined, we truly don't exactly know where your thoughts may lead you and where opportunities may. Once people understand that this is what we're thinking and talking about, people come to me and go, have you thought about, what is this, what is that? And it kind of mushrooms in that way as well, so.
Any other thoughts or questions? Mona?
In all of your travels around the state, you and Linda, is there any school district that has already done a working definition of career ready? Do we know? None whatsoever? Oh, okay. So that would be a starting point
Yes.
to look at what exists out there.
Yep, some districts and some schools in particular are really deeply invested in this.
Any other thoughts before we head into the business items? Great. Do you want to go in order? Do you need a few minutes with staff?
I think we're ready to go. Parker's been prepping me all the way along, and I think I would recommend that we knock out the easy ones first, get those out of the way, and move on. So
Which order then?
I would say if we could go to number 2 and number 3 right away and just knock those out.
And so do I have my script for doing these things?
Do you have the motion sheet, Linda? Okay.
Yeah.
Other
So you
Linda.
said number 2 first?
2 and 3.
2 and 3? Okay.
The issue on Gig Harbor and Everett was.
So I have a motion to approval of the location change for the March 8th and 9th, 2017 meeting.
Move to, move, I think we have to say the whole thing out, don't we?
Yeah.
Move to approve the location change for the March 8th, 9th, 2017 meeting.
Second. Thank you. It's been moved, it's been seconded. Do we have any discussion?
Sorry, Baxter.
There was no facility space. It's not, it's not there.
I know.
Yeah, we can still just show up at his home. There's
I know,
nothing
yeah,
that.
we could.
Do you guys like outdoor meetings?
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. Here we go. Great. So with no discussion, or hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Oh, you'll abstain. Okay, got one abstention? Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, he won't be there at that meeting.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Well, he could come
Bob.
if you wanted to.
That's right.
I know how much you want to.
I know, yeah, we'll show up at Bob's house. All right, so we have business item number 3, to approval of a special board meeting for reviewing and establishing high school cut scores, including alternative assessment cut scores, on the August 15, 2016 Do I have a motion?
I move to approve a special board meeting for reviewing and establishing high school cut scores, including alternative assessment cut scores on August 15th, 2016.
Do I have a second? Now that it has been moved and seconded, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? No. Okay, great. The ayes have it. The motion is approved. Number 5? Okay. The next item is to approval of the temporary waiver for college and career graduation requirements for Clarkston School District, Everett Public Schools, and Spokane Public Schools. Do I have a motion? Do I? Oh, sorry. Yep. Oh, can you?
Sorry. Want me to do it again?
No, I don't think you need to.
I don't think I need to. I was projecting.
Yeah, you were projecting this one.
Everett Public Schools and Spokane Public Schools.
Second.
Now that it has been, now that we have a motion, it's been seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Ben, do you want me to just go down from there?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Number 8.
All right.
And by the way, staff has reviewed, Member Kuhn asked for an amendment. It's fine, so there's no issue.
Can you show the amendment
Yeah.
so everybody
Go
can
ahead.
see it?
Parker's going to put it up.
Perfect. Whoa.
So basically, it's a situation where staff members
Can you
taking notes.
make it bigger? My eyes are not that great. Thank you.
So by way of explanation, sometimes when you're taking minutes in a meeting and a member says something, you attribute it to a member. And then, of course, it's a true statement that some members felt exactly as to what was indicated there. So there's no problem. And
Great. So I have a motion to approval of the minutes from the November 4th through 5th, 2015 board meeting. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes from the November 4th and 5th, 2015 board meeting as amended and shown in Exhibit C.
Oh, is that right? Oh, she's doing to amend it. Yeah, so second it. It's, okay, great.
Yeah.
We have a second. Holly.
Madam Chair, I would I make a friendly amendment? I guess I would move to amend the November 4th, 5th, 2015 minutes as shown in Exhibit C.
Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion? Madeline.
It's really fast. I don't know how important it is, but in the part where it talks about my presentation, it says that I elected not to take advanced placement, and it's not that big of a deal, but I'm not taking as many advanced placement courses. So I am taking advanced placement courses, but I'm not taking as many. So I don't know if that's
what
necessary.
page is that on?
It's on page 9 of
What?
the packet.
About
So the second,
how far down? Page 9 and then
so at the top says
first paragraph?
first and then fourth. There you go. So
Yeah, she can make
No
a friendly
longer-
amendment to your amendment.
And I'll accept it.
Yeah.
and then there's one more at the very top of that same page.
Oh, can students
Hmm?
make amendments? No, they can't.
Holly can make the
Holly can-
motion on her behalf if she so desires.
Madam Chair, I would like to amend my amendment in a friendly way.
Great. Okay, continue, Madeline.
Awesome. And then there's
Yeah,
she
there's
elected
one
not
more.
to take as many.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have an amendment to the amendment. Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion? Does the?
It's a friendly amendment, so we don't have to
Approval, right?
I accept my own friendly amendment. Can I do
Yes.
that?
That's weird, but yes. Okay.
All right, so now we're voting on the
The
whole
whole
amendment.
amendment. And do we have any discussion on the amendment as it reads now? No. So all those in favor of this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Now we have to vote on the whole, approving the board minutes. So,
We have a motion already.
we already have the motion. So do I have do I need to second again? Okay, so we can just vote. So voting on the full, the amended minutes from the November 4th and 5th meeting in 2015. Any further discussion? No? So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it. Great. I know, yeah. Hopefully they won't. Which one do you,
Okay, let's just go back to the top,
back
number
to the
one.
top and go down? So we have an item, business item to adopt, the adoption of an aligning education compensation systems with new credentialing policies and address teacher shortages as a 2016 legislative priority. Do I have a motion? Yep.
Madam Chair, I move to adopt, align, and address educator compensation systems with new credentialing policies and address educator shortages as a 2016 legislative priority as shown in Exhibit A.
Do I have a second? Do we have any discussion? Connie?
Was the language about addressing the teacher shortage incorporated in there?
Yeah, can we give Parker a second to explain what, so Parker, can you tell us what? There was one suggested change by
Which I
the
made.
chair and Peter. Go ahead, Parker.
Any further discussion or questions? Bob?
When you really dig into this, I know a couple people on the compensation committee, and this was very heavily debated, this move, as I'm sure you mentioned. But it's also an example of watching sausage, being made. I think it's an important move to start talking about competency of people versus just their age, how long they taught, how many degrees they've had. But I would suggest that there's a lot to be done, too, as you do that move. People abusing the system, figuring out ways to shortcut the system. And whether it really helps teacher shortages to make more certification, more things to pass, I question. But I think, the overall objective is in the right direction.
I agree.
Holly?
So I think one thing, and I think that, when we had the presentation on this, I think that it was really well articulated, but I guess I would just reiterate that the new salary allocation model, the framework for that model, really doesn't represent anything different than what we are currently doing, except because what we're currently doing, we've overlaid on an antiquated model. I think it just makes transparent what we are currently doing. It doesn't change anything about what teachers are making for what, in terms of accepting that it shortens the columns of experience and it lines up with the credentialing that teachers already have to do. Right? Does it make sense? So a teacher that's in a particular salary sal right now, under this new model, their pay wouldn't really change. It just means that they are being acknowledged for why they are actually being paid that way. Right? It illuminates what we're currently doing. It lines up with the modern system. And I think it's so much simpler for people to understand, and I think it places value on what we're asking educators to do anyway. And a lot of teachers were involved in developing this, so.
Jeff, and then Connie.
Actually, my comment doesn't have really anything to do with the alignment piece. It was a question I asked Jack, the other day was after listening to the career readiness piece and thinking about and I have to confess I don't know the details, but what teachers are being asked to do in this certification, process which I assumed was really about effective instructional practice and so on. I began to wonder, is there anything in there that actually would drive teacher behavior to pay more attention to helping with the career readiness questions we've been talking about? And I was assuming that, and part of this is driven from a young lady that's near and dear to one of my sons who's a teacher who's going through this. And so what's in it for her, of course, is to move up and increase her salary and so on. So she's going to do whatever those certification things require. And if there's nothing there about in her practice about really thinking about career readiness and incorporating that into her practice, she's a good teacher. I assume she won't do it, and so or won't think about it. So I asked them if maybe I asked Ben and Jack if they knew if there was a connection. I think it's fair to say you guys weren't sure, and we're going to check on it. Maybe you already did. I don't know.
I haven't checked on it in depth, but I did ask Ms. Wallace, and she said that element is incorporated in the ProTeach
Thank you.
Portfolio assessment.
Appreciate that. I was just concerned. So again, I'm in support of all this, but I just wanted to be sure, given human behavior, that was actually there and was a driver. So thanks for doing that. Appreciate it.
Thanks for that clarification, Jeff. Connie?
Yeah, my question is, can we get a handout that accompanies this that outlines the systemic measures proposed by the Professional Educator Standards Boards, et cetera, so that we can take that to legislators when we go advocate for that, because we've got the matrix, which is the salary scale, but we don't have this in one document.
Yeah, Member Fletcher, those are included in the policy brief by the PESB in your packet, and they're summarized in the staff memo too.
Peter?
So this is a self-congratulatory comment for all of us. I've observed in this meeting, we have done more working with other agencies than in previous ones. And I really hope that we continue it. I think it's what the public deserves, it's what the public expects, and it's going to be effective.
Yeah, the great point. I agree that there's been a lot more collaboration at this meeting, so it's been great with other organizations. MJ?
I just expected that to happen all the time. I don't know any different.
Any other? We've set a new standard that we have to keep up for MJ. Any other questions? Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. The motion carries. We're going on to number 4, approval of the credit-based graduation requirement waiver for Issaquah School District. Do I have a motion? Oh, Connie. Oh, sorry. Did you have something else?
No, I wanted to move.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I move to approve the credit-based graduation requirement waiver for Issaquah School District for the 2015-16, 2016-17.
Oh, Connie, wait, you have the wrong. Read mine. It has the wrong years on it.
Oh.
There's been a change.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Huh? Yeah. Linda, can you explain the change?
Sure, it was caught like at some point during the lunch hour that they had actually requested starting 16-17 year, and inadvertently it had been put in as the 2015-2016.
Okay.
So just eliminate that part of it.
Okay.
That makes it. So their application was correct, and your authorization is allowed to do 4 years, not 5. So that was just a mistake, a staff mistake that we inadvertently caught late.
I move to approve the credit-based graduation requirements waiver for Issaquah School District for the 2016-17, 2017-18, 2018-19, and 2019-20 school years for the reasons requested in its application to the board.
Do I have a second? It's been moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion? Trey?
Just that I'm excited about this, and I would like to make sure, like we did with the school, big picture and highlight, I think came at some point, how they're doing, make sure we don't, I know we intend to do that, but I really want to see how they're doing. And like Connie, I always have this yellow flag because of the outcomes, but based on the folks and what they said and the quality of their application, I feel comfortable, but I still want to see how it's manifesting both on students and which type of students actually end up in the school. This would be interesting coming for a community like Issaquah to see how Highline is one thing, and I think there's one on the east side I visited, but I'll be really curious to see how it works in a higher affluent community like Issaquah if it reaches the intended students. But I think it will.
Judy?
I just wondered if the way the motion is structured, I think this is for, what's it, the Eck School?
Gibson Eck.
Gibson Eck, yeah.
Would you like to know what Gibson Eck is?
Sure.
Gibson Eck, there were three, they were the first three students in the Issaquah School District. There were two sisters named Gibson and one girl named Eck.
Gibson, and Eck. Well, my question is, being the way the motion is stated, it sounds like the credit waivers for the whole district. That was my, just a clarifying question. I mean, see, I'm thinking like an administrator here. Wait, but wait.
Linda's gonna check for us. Great catch, Judy. We're here cheering from Issaquah.
My administrative cheater hat just went on.
So would you like me to withdraw the motion that I made? and substitute this one, or does it take a formal amendment? Withdraw? Okay. I move to approve the credit-based graduation requirements waiver for Gibson Eck High School as requested by the Issaquah School District for the 2016-17, 2017-18, 2018-19, and 2019-20 school years for the reasons requested in its application to the board.
I'm sorry.
We made the motion, we got another second.
Okay, good. We're good to go. Any discussion? Any further discussion? I
Connie,
apologize.
you were already beloved in Issaquah. You would have just been celebrated.
Yeah. So, just one comment I have, is that Linda and I talked about this morning. Some of you may remember the Phoenix School in Kennewick that we went to visit, which also very similar model, but credit-based. And they, and I think it goes back to, I think Bob said this, that, there's flexibility even within the credit requirement, because they would just link what the student was learning with the credits that you would earn for learning those skills or demonstrating those competencies, and would issue the credits based on looking at the whole project. What did you get credit for, essentially? So, but again, we encourage innovation as long as we're seeing the results. So I'm really excited, I think, what Trey's saying, to continue to follow these kinds of different models of schools to see if there's things that we can learn system-wide. With that, any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Yes. Oh, yeah. They're watching, apparently. Okay, great. So number 6, adoption of the ESSA position statement. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have discussion?
This works perfectly.
Oh.
I was the one who brought it up, I think.
Yes.
So I think this is perfect.
Yeah. Any further discussion or questions? Yeah. Parker, can you just slowly scroll down so we can see? Yeah. Stop. Yeah. Any further discussion? One thing I just zoomed in on, and I am really excited about, is this idea of creating a more meaningful framework for performance improvement goal settings that maintain comparability across schools. Like that concept of more meaningful. I think that we hear a lot. That was a theme. We heard a lot about how do we make the accountability system more meaningful as we shift from ESEA to ESSA and taking on some of those responsibilities. So any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. The motion carries. We're on to number 7, approval of filing of CR 101, proposal statement of inquiry for the possible amendment to Chapter 180, 105 WAC performance improvement goals. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve staff drafting and filing a CR 101 for possible amendment to Chapter 180, 105 Washington Administrative Code performance improvement goals.
Do Do I have a second? Now that we have a motion and a second, any discussion? Holly?
Okay, at the risk of sounding totally out of it, can somebody just remind me what this is doing? Like like the two-sentence version?
Yeah.
So rule writing incorporates the publication of various statements. A 101 is simply, you wanted the two-sentence version. It's like you're holding up a banner to the world saying, we intend to start looking at this. We're not doing anything, but
We may not even amend, right?
we intend to
just
start
gonna
looking at this.
looking.
We have no idea what we'll do, and we don't know how long it'll take, but we intend to look at this. And that is like you are informing the world of your intent to do something this. It doesn't have a ticking clock with it. You could take 10 years to do it, and it doesn't mean you actually have to make an amendment. You could go in there and decide, oh, yeah, it's fine. You won't in this case, but it is a required step in the process.
And
I
in
think
theory, right, the purpose is so that the public knows that we're
Yes.
going to start entering in conversation, and they're, we want to welcome them to be part of that conversation.
Yeah,
with
I was
us.
going to say that it
Yeah,
signals
that's right.
rulemaking. We may do rulemaking, and some people who track us can see that this issue is coming and start to follow it. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. It's our fiduciary responsibility to the public. Yeah. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it, the motion carries. I have one last piece. I just want to make sure, and I don't know if there's something formal that needs to happen, but we did talk about having a formal letter to OSPI in regards to the moving forward with the ESSA accountability work. Do we need to have a formal vote of the board, or can we just do nods, or how does that?
Well, actually, I wouldn't mind some guidance here because it's going to be like, how far do I take this? So,
So maybe we can have some discussion.
yeah,
here.
it's a big part of my job in terms of working with our partners to figure out the right process, and it is not an unusual situation where multiple agencies all have a little authority in something, and I go into every one of those conversations saying, if we could, my number one goal, honestly, is that a member of the public looking from the outside in wouldn't go, what is wrong with those people? Like to just kind of embody some best practices of collaboration. And to never be just kind of a take your ball and go home scenario here. So I have at this point had a series of meetings, kind of saying, here's where I think the board's authorities lie. There's certain areas where the board has zero authority, but that's not true in all cases. I have proposed that we take the Achievement and Accountability Work Group, which has been our ongoing vessel for a lot of this work, and expand its membership and have OSPI add whomever they feel needs to be added, and continue kind of a joint sponsorship of this process. And that's what makes the most sense to me. It also makes the most sense to me that Randy would absolutely be the lead with the federal government. That's his job. And so there's really no interest on my part or the board's to change that. Just simply to marry the process of doing state law with the process of doing federal law. So that's kind of the message I have gone with. And so we'll see how that goes. So you could write a letter that essentially said that. And I could report back to you on how that was received.
Any comment? Jeff?
I don't know that it'll help you with what you just asked, but I do at least want to make a comment because I've been thinking about it all afternoon, following the panel discussion and so on. And so I'll try to make this very brief, but so the handout that we got, I looked at that and describing, and I thought, here's the innovation. This But for it to be an innovation, right now it's really an idea. It's got to get implemented. So I have a really simple definition of innovation is idea implemented. If it's not implemented, it's just an idea. And to your point, there are a lot of players with roles, responsibilities, authorities, and accountabilities in that mix, and they were sitting there with varying pieces. And I heard a little bit about this, so where people said, here's what we would do or what we might do. And I was thinking about that's the change piece, the change management piece. And what struck me was, including you, Ben, there's executive sponsorship there, and they have to do their part. So this supports what you're saying, but it's broader than that piece. But somehow there's this bigger notion, if this is good to do, and it's innovation we do, that people have to, within those roles and responsibilities, they have to build awareness, build desire, which I think was a huge problem with things we did before. Build knowledge, build capabilities, and reinforce that. So when you're having these conversations, somehow this grander idea of how are we collectively doing our part to manage the change that will benefit students in the end as described, and here may be an interesting, if we could get folks sort of, and I think you were talking about sort of elevated to that point and then saying, what's my part in doing that, and where there's kind of the rub, okay, let's figure out how to work together. Then to your point about, so I'm putting on my Joe Q Public, I'm going to look in and say, whether it's the Principals Association, the superintendents, OSPI, the state board, WEA, and so on, I can see that they've all embraced the idea. They're working towards moving that innovation into practice, and they're doing authentic things for them, and they know what one another is doing. And we can actually tell the story to everybody, so they're not sort of saying, so what are you doing, and what are you doing, and what are you doing? That's I'm not trying to put that burden on you, but wouldn't that be interesting among your peers to have that kind of conversation, and maybe it happens already, but have that kind of conversation, and for it to be really evident to the sort of the rest of us out in the public to see that, then this powerful innovation that could really benefit kids could really have a great chance of doing that. If we could elevate that conversation a little bit, I think it would be interesting to do that. So that's a much bigger piece than the piece you're asking, but I felt compelled to say that all afternoon, so now I can go home and do something else. So. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
So I guess, yeah. So I guess this question for Ben. I fully support what you're doing, and I think that's true around the table. What, from your point of view, would be the most effective vehicle for the board to give a sense of our support in going the direction that exactly Jeff has articulated so well? And I'm mindful that you are, you have ongoing relationships and so forth. So I'm comfortable with the letter from our chair, if that's sufficient. If there's more that you think would be helpful, I guess this would be the time to indicate that.
I have a meeting with Randy on Tuesday or something, and so I'm just going to know a lot more then. I've laid a proposal on the table, and I kind of have a sense as to what this reaction is going to be, but I'll kind of know at that point, like, you know, where we need to go from there. I don't really know at this point, so if I could kind of feel that out, and then I can come back to you, Isabel, and say, here's what I think we should do. Or
Yep. Trey.
I might have missed it, but did the feds lay out what role the state legislatures play in this? I know they mentioned the chief education officer, which in this case is OSPI, but it just hit me. I was like, oh, we're about to go into a session, and a lot of things might get drawn up as it relates to this flexibility. So I was wondering if, oh, there's Jack, thanks.
Remember, Maxie, the House version, I think it was, required that the SEA consult with the legislature. That was dropped from the final bill. However, the governor must sign off on, is the language, I think, on the state plan, which was the same as under NCLB, I believe.
And that was actually one of the things, Trey, that I wanted to talk about when we had the ESSA discussion, and we just didn't get around to it. I mentioned it quick, that our state statutes are in pretty good shape, and I don't really, like, there's no burning thing that we got to go to the legislature and say, oh, you must change this state law so that we can implement ESSA. From my perspective, they're pretty good shape. So I'm not, and thus we have not brought anything up for priorities or anything. I think that if we stick with 5329 and what we have, we should be in pretty decent shape.
I was asking that more about them looking at this as an opportunity to, saying, oh, wow, we can do something at a state. I was looking at them generating laws and things because of the flexibility.
Well, I've been invited to present to the Senate Ed Committee next week, or do you remember, Denise, was it next week or two? Anyway, coming up is there's the Senate Ed Committee is having a panel on this. And I think that Alan was pretty blunt about the fact that maybe not this session, but next session, there'll inevitably be legislation to say, yeah, if you want to do SET, do it, kind of thing. I would imagine that there's a certain inevitability about that. And probably across all of the states, there will be a movement, to do that. But other than that, I'm hoping that I think the statutory environment's not bad. So.
Holly?
Yeah, I think in terms of what we need to do right now, I'm pretty comfortable with just, Ben, would it help you to have that letter in hand when you met with Randy, or would it be more helpful to meet with Randy and then see if you need a letter? And then if that's the case, then just authorizing Isabel and the executive committee to kind of deal with that.
Yeah. I'm just gonna have to feel that out a little bit. Yeah.
Go to Randy
Yeah. I think
first
what we're
and
saying is that we would.
Yeah.
Isabel's empowered to do this if I need it, kind of. Yeah. Let me just kind of.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 5 years, and I kind of know how to read the tea leaves once I get into that building.
No.
So let me see how that goes.
I mean, I think, one of the things, in this sort of building on what Jeff said, and I think you heard one of the members of the Workforce Development Board talk to this, is that they just reauthorized WIOA, right? Or in the process. And the federal law required a great deal of partnership amongst the stakeholders in our state, in every state, as part of the WIOA reauthorization. And so in talking to talking to one of the staff members, for them it was a huge lift to do that. They had to partner on a level they had never partnered before, but well worth it. I mean, they felt like they're coming sort of on the other end of this process, and there was a lot of kind of staring at each other across the table initially, but they feel very, even regardless of the plan itself, they feel like the process of building that partnership will help lead to greater work down the line as they try to start implementing the new WIOA plan. And so I sort of envision like that could be the potential for us if we really come at this as partners with our other with the other stakeholders in this ESSA work, that there could be it could be a model for how we continue to do work.
And once you guys figure out the letter, might we involve the governor's office, since they do have signature authority? This is going to really be interesting to me, because it's almost giving the governors what the secretary had the power. Now the governors have the power. And I just can't see legislators sitting by in some states just saying, yep, that's between the governor and the head of the education, except where the superintendent is appointed by the governor. But it just struck me, if the governor's office has a significant role with it, which it sounds like they do, we might see once the letter is done, we might as well involve them on the onset too, because I suspect they're going to have an opinion about what the governor is being presented with to sign. So we might, on the front end, once we figure out our strategy, just go ahead and bring the governor's office into play, because they have, sounds like a lot of power if they have to sign off on it. And that's a lot of power that often isn't there, because it usually goes to the legislature, but it's sort of leaving out the legislature. And I didn't digest that till he just said that, how much power the governor's office has in this.
Peter?
So I'd be comfortable leaving that to Isabel and Ben to figure out.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. MJ, congratulations again. You made it through your first board meeting. I know. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to take a minute too to thank staff. We heard several times about how much appreciation we had for the content of this meeting, how this meeting went. And so just wanted to thank the staff for all the hard work that they did leading up to this. So. And wish everyone safe travels home. So any last words, Ben, before we?
Legislator meetings, we have, for those that are joining, we have a meeting with whom at what time? Speaker Chop at 4, and we have a van waiting to take us away. And then what's the other one? Senator Litzo at 5:30. That one was pushed back late because they scheduled a Senate Ways and Means hearing from 3 to 5, I guess. So.
Great. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. And then I think my baby is just outside somewhere. So if anyone wants to see Peter, I'm going to call. My husband, I think he's parked. Oh, yeah, he's in the lobby.